Have you ever wondered what would happen if the most dangerous creature in the wild became the only one willing to protect an innocent human? On a blazing afternoon in Arizona, 3 police officers believed they had found the perfect way to silence a fearless black civil rights attorney forever. They shoved her into a lion enclosure, certain the king of beasts would finish what they had started. But the moment the massive alpha lion locked eyes with her, everything changed. Instead of attacking, he turned toward the officers with a roar so powerful it froze everyone in place. Within minutes, the entire wildlife sanctuary was thrown into chaos. Cameras began recording, and a secret buried for years started clawing its way into the light. What happened next would destroy powerful careers, captivate millions around the world, and prove that sometimes justice arrives wearing a mane instead of a badge. Before we begin, let me know where you're watching from, and if this story moves you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay until the very end. Because the final meeting between this woman and the lion will leave you speechless. The afternoon sun hung over Red Canyon Safari Park like molten brass, baking the sandstone cliffs until the air shimmered with heat and silence. Amara Johnson had always believed that truth was worth discomfort. That belief had cost her promotions, friendships, and more than one sleepless night. It had also made her one of New Mexico's most respected civil rights attorneys, a woman who refused to look away when power crushed people too weak to fight back. Today, however, she wasn't walking into a courtroom. She was walking into a safari park. She parked her aging gray SUV beneath a cluster of cottonwood trees and checked her phone again. 11:57 a.m. A text message still glowed on the screen. "Please don't call me anymore. They're watching. Meet me behind the lion enclosure, noon. Come alone." The message had come from Daniel Ruiz, a maintenance technician at Red Canyon Safari Park. Daniel wasn't her client. He was supposed to become her witness. For weeks, Amara had been investigating several complaints involving Sheriff Douglas Pike's department. Residents claimed deputies had intimidated suspects, altered reports, and threatened anyone willing to testify. Most accusations fell apart because witnesses suddenly changed their stories. Until Daniel contacted her. He claimed he'd seen Sheriff Pike assault a young ranch worker during a private fundraiser held inside the safari park months earlier. According to Daniel, security cameras had recorded everything before the footage mysteriously disappeared. If he told the truth under oath, everything could change. Amara slipped her phone into her pocket and adjusted the canvas messenger bag hanging across her shoulder. She wasn't afraid. She'd learned long ago that fear never disappeared. You simply decided whether it would drive the car or sit quietly in the passenger seat. Growing up in Albuquerque, she'd watched her father, a public school teacher, lose his job after exposing corruption inside the district. He used to tell her, "Justice doesn't always win first, but lies always get tired before truth does." Those words had shaped her entire life. Now she whispered them under her breath as she entered the park. Families laughed nearby. Children pointed excitedly toward giraffes wandering across the distant plains. Tourists balanced melting ice cream while snapping photos. Everything felt impossibly ordinary, which somehow made Daniel's warning even heavier. She followed a narrow service road leading away from the crowds. Soon the cheerful noises faded. Concrete paths became gravel. Decorative fences gave way to heavy steel gates marked "Authorized Personnel Only." The scent changed too. Instead of popcorn and sunscreen, the wind carried hay, damp earth, disinfectant, and something unmistakably wild. A deep, feline musk lingered in the dry air. She checked her surroundings. No Daniel. Only the distant sound of lions somewhere beyond the rocky ridge. Her phone vibrated. "Unknown number," she answered quietly. "Daniel?" A shaky whisper replied, "They're already here." The call disconnected. Amara's pulse quickened. Before she could dial back, voices echoed around the corner. "I told you nobody leaves until this gets handled." She froze. Instinctively, she stepped behind a maintenance truck parked beside a storage building. Two uniformed officers stood 20 yards away. Sheriff Douglas Pike, Deputy Mason Holt. Facing them was a nervous man wearing a safari park maintenance uniform. Daniel. His shoulders trembled. "I already erased the files," Daniel pleaded. "I swear." Sheriff Pike smiled. It wasn't the smile of a grateful man. It was the smile of someone deciding how much pain another person deserved. "You erased what I told you to erase," Pike said softly. "But now you're talking." Daniel shook his head desperately. "I haven't said anything." Deputy Mason grabbed the front of Daniel's shirt. "You called somebody." I didn't." The deputy slammed him against a concrete wall. Amara's heart lurched. Without thinking, she pulled out her phone. Her thumb hit record. Every instinct told her to stay hidden. Every instinct she'd built her career on told her something else. Evidence mattered. She carefully angled the camera around the truck. The recording captured Mason shoving Daniel again. Sheriff Pike leaned close enough that Daniel almost disappeared beneath his shadow. "If you ever speak my name inside a courtroom," he paused, "they'll never find enough of you to bury." Daniel's face drained of color. Amara felt anger rising inside her like wildfire. This wasn't intimidation. This was terror. She kept recording, every second, every word. Then, Sheriff Pike looked up. His eyes met hers. Time stopped. For a single heartbeat, neither moved. Then Pike's expression changed. Recognition. Calculation. Rage. "Who's there?" Amara stepped backward. Too late. Mason spotted the phone. "She's recording!" The deputy sprinted toward her. Amara turned and ran. Gravel sprayed beneath her shoes as she raced down the service road. Behind her came heavy boots. "Stop!" She refused. She wasn't running because she was guilty. She was running because evidence had to survive. Her fingers shook as she pressed the emergency cloud upload button. The progress circle appeared. Uploading. 23%. Come on. Come on. She rounded another corner and nearly collided with a steel security gate. Beyond it rose enormous artificial cliffs. Signs warned, "Authorized personnel only, lion habitat." She was trapped. Behind her, Mason closed the distance. Sheriff Pike walked after him, surprisingly calm, almost amused. "No one's going to believe you," Pike said. Amara lifted the phone higher. "The video's already uploading." A flicker crossed Pike's face. Only for an instant. Then it disappeared. "Give me the phone." "No." "You have no idea what you're involved in." "I know exactly what I recorded." Mason lunged. Amara twisted away. The phone slipped. She caught it against her chest. Another shove. Her shoulder struck the steel railing protecting the elevated maintenance walkway overlooking part of the lion enclosure. Metal groaned. She realized, too late, how close she stood to the drop beyond. Pike glanced toward the empty service area. No tourists, no keepers, no witnesses, only the three of them. His voice became frighteningly quiet. "You should have walked away." Amara stared directly into his eyes. "I don't walk away." For one fraction of a second she thought he might simply arrest her. Instead, he nodded once at Mason. The deputy understood immediately. Mason drove both hands into Amara's shoulders, hard. The world vanished beneath her feet. She felt empty air, weightlessness. The sky spun. Steel railing flashed overhead. Then, impact. The ground exploded beneath her, dust filled her lungs, pain shot through her ribs, her phone skidded several feet across the dirt. She couldn't breathe. Above her, she heard Mason shouting, "She climbed over! She jumped!" Sheriff Pike immediately grabbed his radio. "Emergency! Woman entered the lion enclosure!" His voice sounded practiced, convincing. Amara stared upward in disbelief. They were already writing the story, already burying the truth. Tears burned behind her eyes, not from pain, but from the crushing realization that if she died here, everyone would believe them. Then, the earth trembled, once, twice, heavy footsteps, slow, measured, ancient. Amara forced herself onto one elbow. Emerging from beneath the shade of a sandstone overhang came the largest lion she had ever seen. His golden mane flowed around his massive shoulders like fire touched by sunlight. His amber eyes never blinked. Every instinct inside her screamed, "This is how it ends." Behind him, another lion appeared. A lioness, graceful, silent, watching. Somewhere above the enclosure, people began screaming. Phones appeared over the railings, visitors gathered. Someone shouted for park rangers. Amara couldn't move. The enormous male lion continued walking toward her. Closer, closer. Every heartbeat sounded louder than the last. 20 feet, 15, 10. He stopped. The lion lowered his massive head. His amber eyes studied her face. She closed her eyes, whispering the only prayer she could remember. When she opened them again, the impossible happened. The lion stepped past her, not toward her, past her. He turned, placed his immense body directly between Amara and the two officers standing above the fence. His tail lashed once. A low growl rolled from his chest. Not at her, at Sheriff Douglas Pike. The lioness silently moved beside Amara's left shoulder, forming a second barrier. Neither animal looked at her as prey. They looked beyond her, at the men who had pushed her there. For the first time that day, Sheriff Douglas Pike's confident smile disappeared. Then the alpha lion, Caesar, lifted his magnificent head toward the railing and unleashed a thunderous roar so powerful that every bird erupted from the cliffs, every tourist fell silent, and the sheriff instinctively stumbled backward, his face drained of every trace of confidence. The roar rolled across Red Canyon Safari Park like thunder trapped between canyon walls, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. For several long seconds, no one moved. Dust drifted through the afternoon sunlight. Visitors stood frozen along the viewing platform. Even the children who had been crying moments earlier stared in speechless disbelief. Inside the enclosure, Amara Johnson forced herself to breathe. Every instinct screamed at her to run. Every article she had ever read about lions warned against turning her back, making sudden movements, or showing panic. Yet none of those articles had ever described this. Caesar wasn't watching her. His amber eyes remained locked on Sheriff Douglas Pike. The massive lion stood broadside in front of Amara like a living wall, his mane lifting gently in the warm desert breeze. Beside her, the lioness Nala settled onto her haunches without taking her eyes off the officers above. It felt less like being surrounded by predators and more like being guarded by soldiers. "Nobody move!" someone shouted from the observation deck. Within moments, emergency sirens echoed across the reserve. Several park rangers raced toward the enclosure carrying tranquilizer rifles, emergency kits, and radios crackling with overlapping voices. "Human inside lion habitat 3. Prepare sedation. Medical team en route." A young ranger raised his dart rifle. Before he could aim, another voice cut through the confusion. "Hold your fire!" Everyone turned. Marcus Bennett, the 62-year-old director of Red Canyon Safari Park, hurried onto the platform. Years of working with rescued predators had carved deep lines into his weathered face, but the calm in his eyes never disappeared. He studied Caesar for barely 3 seconds. Then he lowered the ranger's rifle himself. "No tranquilizers." The younger ranger stared. "Sir, she's trapped." "I can see that." The lion hasn't threatened her." The ranger hesitated. "He's protecting her." Marcus nodded slowly. "I've never seen Caesar behave like this." His gaze remained fixed on the enormous male. "If we shoot him now, he'll believe we're attacking." Another ranger swallowed nervously. "What do we do?" "We wait." The order shocked everyone, including Amara. She looked toward Marcus. Their eyes met briefly. He raised one hand. "Miss Johnson?" His voice remained remarkably steady. "Don't stand. Don't crawl. Don't look Caesar directly in the eyes. Just stay exactly where you are." Amara nodded once. Every muscle in her body wanted to move. Instead, she folded her trembling hands together and remained seated on the warm sand. Her ribs ached from the fall. Her palms were scraped raw. But strangely, the fear that had overwhelmed her moments ago began changing. She wasn't safe, not truly. Yet something deep inside told her the greatest danger was no longer the lion standing 5 feet away. It was the men outside the enclosure. Above the railing, Sheriff Pike recovered enough confidence to step forward. "This woman trespassed," he shouted. "We need to remove her immediately." Marcus barely looked at him. "My concern is keeping everyone alive." Deputy Mason Holt pointed angrily toward Amara. "Then send someone in." Nobody answered, because every ranger could see what happened whenever someone moved closer. Caesar's ears immediately rotated, his body stiffened. A low, warning rumble vibrated through the ground. Marcus quietly shook his head. "No." The sheriff's jaw tightened. "You don't understand." "I understand animals," Marcus replied without emotion. "And right now, that lion trusts none of us." Not even the sheriff noticed the elderly man approaching from behind. His name was Samuel Ortiz. For nearly 35 years, he had cared for rescued big cats across 3 continents. He leaned lightly on a weathered walking stick as he studied Caesar. Then he sighed. "I hoped I'd never see that look again." Marcus glanced toward him. "You recognize it?" Samuel nodded slowly. "Trauma." Several younger keepers turned. Samuel continued quietly. "Before Caesar came here, poachers kept him chained for almost 2 years. Silence spread across the platform. They beat him whenever he resisted. They starved him. They used electric prods." One ranger whispered, "My God." Samuel kept watching the lion. When rescue teams finally found him, the only humans he ever attacked were the ones who carried weapons with violent intentions. Marcus looked back toward Sheriff Pike, then toward Mason. Neither officer seemed aware of how pale they had become. Samuel spoke again. "Caesar doesn't judge uniforms. He judges behavior." Below them, the great lion never once looked away from the officers, almost as though Samuel's words had become visible. Meanwhile, more visitors crowded the observation rails. Dozens of phones pointed toward the enclosure. Videos streamed live across social media. Sheriff Pike suddenly realized what that meant. He spun toward the crowd. "Turn those cameras off!" Nobody listened. "This is an active police investigation." Several tourists lowered their phones, only to lift them again when others continued recording. Pike grew louder. "Delete those videos immediately!" His command only attracted more attention. A teenage girl whispered, "Why would he want the videos deleted?" An older man frowned. "Something doesn't seem right." Then a child's voice rose above everyone else's. "I saw it!" The crowd turned. A little boy, no older than 9, stood clutching his mother's hand. His face had gone pale. The mother knelt beside him. "Ethan," the boy pointed toward the officers. "That man pushed her." His tiny finger aimed directly at Mason Holt. "I saw him." Mason laughed nervously. "Kid, you don't know what you saw." "I do," the boy's voice cracked. "He shoved her." His mother hugged him protectively. He hasn't stopped talking about it since it happened. More murmurs spread through the crowd. Sheriff Pike's carefully constructed story began unraveling one witness at a time. Inside the enclosure, Amara finally noticed her phone. It rested nearly 15 feet away, half buried beneath sand. The screen still glowed faintly. She dared not reach for it. Caesar noticed it too. The lion glanced briefly toward the device, then back toward the officers, as if silently reminding everyone where the real threat remained. Mason suddenly snapped, "I'm getting that phone." Before anyone could stop him, he climbed over the outer safety barrier. Marcus shouted, "Get down!" Mason ignored him. He carefully lowered one foot toward the maintenance ledge leading into the enclosure. That single movement changed everything. Caesar exploded. The transformation happened so fast it barely seemed possible. One heartbeat he stood motionless. The next he launched forward with astonishing speed. His roar struck the canyon like an avalanche. Mason froze. Caesar stopped less than 10 feet away, not attacking, blocking. The lion planted himself squarely between Amara and the descending deputy. Dust swirled around his enormous paws, his muscles rippled beneath golden fur. Every inch of his body declared one unmistakable message: "You will not come closer." Mason stumbled backward so quickly he nearly fell from the railing. Visitors gasped. Someone whispered, "He knows." Another answered, "It's like he understands." Marcus slowly exhaled. "I've worked with lions for 40 years. I've never witnessed anything like this." While everyone's attention remained fixed on Caesar, another discovery quietly unfolded inside the security control room. "Director Bennett!" A young technician ran toward him carrying a tablet. "The enclosure cameras." Marcus frowned. "What about them?" "They're working." Everyone stopped talking. "I thought they were disconnected during renovations." "So did I." The technician swallowed. "But somebody forgot to shut down the backup recording system." Marcus stared at the screen. Every angle, every second. The entire incident had been captured. Standing nearby, Ranger Elena Morales immediately understood the danger. She also saw Sheriff Pike notice the technician. Their eyes met. For only an instant. That was enough. Without saying a word, Elena quietly took the backup drive from the technician. She slipped it inside her medical backpack while pretending to organize emergency supplies. No one except Marcus noticed. He gave the slightest nod. She disappeared toward the operations building before anyone could stop her. Inside the enclosure, Amara's breathing gradually steadied. Her fear remained, but hope returned. Carefully, she looked toward her phone again. The cracked screen suddenly lit brighter. A notification appeared. Despite the distance, one word was unmistakable: uploaded. Her heart skipped. The automatic cloud backup had finished before she fell. The recording survived. The truth existed somewhere no one here could erase. Amara closed her eyes for just 1 second. Not in despair this time, in gratitude. When she opened them again, Caesar remained standing between her and the men who wanted silence. and for the first time since she had been thrown into the lion's kingdom, she realized something extraordinary. She was no longer fighting alone. The desert wind carried the scent of dust and sage as helicopters circled above Red Canyon's safari park, turning an already impossible afternoon into national news. Within 40 minutes, every local television station in New Mexico had interrupted regular programming. By the end of the hour, helicopters from Albuquerque, Santa Fe, and El Paso hovered above the reserve. The story spreading across television screens wasn't simply that a woman had fallen into a lion enclosure. It was that an alpha lion appeared to be protecting her from police officers. Amara Johnson remained seated exactly where Marcus Bennett had instructed. Her legs felt numb. Her shoulder throbbed from Mason Holt's shove. Every few minutes, Caesar glanced toward her, then shifted his attention back toward the growing crowd beyond the fence. He had not taken a single threatening step toward her, not once. Nala rested several feet behind Amara, calm but alert, occasionally lifting her head whenever unfamiliar voices approached. It was almost as if the two lions had silently divided responsibilities. Caesar watched the danger. Nala watched the survivor. Above the enclosure, Sheriff Douglas Pike realized something far worse than losing control of the scene. He was losing control of the story. His phone rang repeatedly. County officials, news reporters, state police. He ignored every call. Instead, he turned toward the arriving deputies. "I want this entire area locked down." One deputy hesitated. "Sir?" "No visitors. No media. No unauthorized personnel. And nobody leaves until every phone is collected." Marcus Bennett stepped forward. "Absolutely not." Pike glared at him. "This is now a law enforcement scene." Marcus folded his arms. "This is private property. And more importantly," he pointed toward Amara, "that woman is still alive. You don't have the authority to interfere with her safety." For several tense seconds, neither man spoke. Then another convoy entered the park. Not county vehicles, black SUVs, no visible department markings. Several men and women stepped out wearing dark jackets with bright yellow letters across their backs. "FBI-A" murmur swept through the crowd. Douglas Pike's expression changed instantly. Special Agent Rebecca Collins approached without hurry. She was in her early 40s, composed, and carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent years questioning people who lied for a living. She stopped beside Pike. "I'm Special Agent Collins. We're assuming federal oversight." Pike forced a smile. "Agent, this is just an unfortunate accident." "So I've heard." Her eyes briefly moved toward the enclosure. "And I've also heard several other versions." Pike gestured impatiently. "The woman climbed over." Collins didn't answer. Instead, she asked, "Where is your body camera?" The sheriff blinked. It should have activated during a use of force incident." Pike's pause lasted 1 second too long. Collins noticed. So did everyone else. Meanwhile, inside the operations building, Ranger Elena Morales stood beside Marcus Bennett and 2 FBI forensic technicians. The backup security server had finally finished loading. Multiple camera angles appeared across several monitors, timestamps, audio, crystal clear footage. Nobody spoke. They watched silently. Amara stepping backward, Sheriff Pike nodding, Mason Holt driving both hands into her shoulders, her body lifting off the ground, her desperate fall over the railing. Silence filled the room. One technician quietly rewound the footage, played it again. There was no ambiguity, no accident, no stumble, no self-inflicted fall. It was assault. Marcus slowly removed his glasses. "I knew what I saw." Agent Collins nodded. "So did the cameras." Outside, another unexpected figure stepped through the growing crowd. A gray-haired man carrying an old employee badge. His name was Leonard Briggs. He had worked at Red Canyon Safari Park for nearly 20 years before resigning 3 years earlier. Collins approached him. "You asked to speak with us?" Leonard swallowed. "I should have done this years ago." His eyes drifted toward Douglas Pike. "I was scared." He took a deep breath. Every time someone complained about the sheriff, they somehow lost their jobs. Businesses failed inspections. Families suddenly got investigated. People stopped talking. He looked directly at Collins. Because everyone knew what happened to people who embarrassed Douglas Pike. Nearby reporters captured every word. Pike shouted, "He's lying!" Leonard didn't even look at him. "No." His voice trembled. "I've just been silent for too long." Inside the enclosure, another rescue team slowly approached, carrying reinforced transport shields. Marcus called down to Amara. "We're sending veterinary staff." "They know, Caesar." "No sudden movements." Amara nodded. The veterinary team entered through a secondary security gate. 3 people, no weapons, no uniforms resembling law enforcement. The reaction astonished everyone. Caesar watched them, then calmly stepped aside. Not far, only enough to allow them closer. One veterinarian knelt several yards from Amara. "It's okay. We're not taking you away from him." Amara almost laughed despite everything. The sentence sounded absurd. Yet Caesar's relaxed posture proved the veterinarian somehow understood exactly what mattered. When one county deputy attempted to accompany the rescue team, everything changed. Caesar immediately swung around. His mane bristled. A deep, warning growl rolled across the enclosure. The deputy froze. Marcus raised one hand. "Back away." The deputy obeyed. Instantly, Caesar relaxed again. Several wildlife biologists standing nearby stared in disbelief. Dr. Allison Grant, a behavioral zoologist from the University of New Mexico, quietly recorded notes into her phone. "I've spent 18 years studying social predators. I've documented territorial defense, maternal protection, coalition behavior. I've never documented selective moral discrimination." Another scientist nodded slowly. "He isn't responding to uniforms. He's responding to individuals." The statement quickly spread through the assembled reporters. Within minutes, television anchors across America repeated the same extraordinary question. Why would an abused rescue lion trust rescuers, but reject specific police officers? The internet exploded. Videos recorded by tourists flooded every social media platform. One clip showed Mason chasing Amara. Another captured Caesar placing himself directly between her and the officers. A third, filmed by a teenager from the observation deck, captured the exact moment the sheriff demanded visitors stop recording. By sunset, the hashtag Justice for Amara had become the nation's top trend. Crowds began gathering outside Red Canyon Safari Park. Then hundreds became thousands. People carried handmade signs. "Truth matters. Protect the innocent. Justice is watching." Many had never heard of Amara Johnson that morning. Now they chanted her name. Sheriff Pike watched the growing crowd through clenched teeth. Everything was collapsing. His deputies looked uncertain. County officials stopped answering his calls. Television cameras followed his every movement. He made one decision. He quietly walked toward the employee parking lot. No announcement, no explanation, just a steady pace toward his patrol SUV. Maybe he could reach the county office first. Maybe he could regain control. He never reached the driver's door. 3 black SUVs blocked the exit. Agent Collins stepped out. "So soon?" Pike forced another smile. "I've got official business." Collins held up a folder. "No. You have questions to answer." 2 FBI agents moved beside him. "This is unlawful detention," Pike protested. Collins remained calm. "No. It's preservation of evidence." She glanced toward his vehicle. "We'll also need your department-issued laptop, your radios, and every digital device currently assigned to you." For the first time all day, Sheriff Douglas Pike looked genuinely frightened. As agents escorted him away from the parking lot, Collins received a phone call. She listened without speaking, then slowly lowered the phone. Marcus noticed her expression. "What is it?" Collins looked toward the lion enclosure where Caesar still stood watch over Amara. Then she quietly said, "Our records division just matched Sheriff Pike's name to a sealed federal file." Marcus frowned. "What kind of file?" Collins closed the folder in her hands. "The kind that contains complaints nobody was ever supposed to see." She looked toward Pike as agents placed him inside an FBI vehicle. "It appears today's assault wasn't the beginning. It may have been the mistake that finally uncovered years of buried abuse." And somewhere beyond the flashing lights and television cameras, Caesar lifted his head toward the crimson evening sky and released another deep roar, as if announcing that the truth had only just begun to emerge. The first snow of winter never reached Red Canyon. But on the morning the trial began, television satellites covered the courthouse lawn like a forest of steel, turning justice into the most watched story in America. 3 months had passed since the day Amara Johnson had fallen into the lion enclosure. 3 months of investigations, 3 months of forensic reports, 3 months of interviews, leaked documents, and headlines that refused to disappear. Every major news network repeated the same phrase: "The lion who protected a woman." Some called Caesar a miracle. Others called him an instinctive animal, reacting to circumstances no one fully understood. For Amara, he was neither. He was simply the reason she was still alive. She stood outside the federal courthouse in Albuquerque, staring at the massive stone steps before taking a slow breath. She had argued dozens of cases inside buildings like this, but today she wasn't walking in as an attorney. She was entering as the victim. That difference weighed heavier than she expected. A court officer opened the doors. "Miss Johnson?" She nodded. "It's time." Inside courtroom 3, every seat had been filled long before sunrise. Journalists lined the back wall. Legal observers had traveled from across the country. Wildlife experts occupied an entire section reserved for scientific witnesses. Even retired judges had quietly slipped into the gallery. At the defense table sat Sheriff Douglas Pike and Deputy Mason Holt. Neither man wore a badge anymore. The uniforms that had once commanded respect had been replaced by dark business suits that somehow made them appear even smaller. Douglas avoided looking toward Amara. Mason couldn't stop looking. His confidence had disappeared months earlier. The indictment contained 16 separate charges: federal civil rights violations, obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, conspiracy, aggravated assault, witness intimidation. The list continued for nearly 5 full minutes as the clerk read each count aloud. Every word echoed through the silent courtroom. When the judge asked how they pleaded, "Not guilty," Douglas answered first. Mason quietly repeated him. The trial began immediately. The prosecution opened with facts, not emotion. Security footage, medical reports, forensic measurements, digital records proving Amara's phone had begun uploading evidence before she fell. Every document reinforced the same conclusion. She had never entered the enclosure voluntarily. The defense knew those facts were impossible to erase, so they chose another strategy. Attorney Victor Langley stood before the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, no one disputes that Ms. Johnson entered the enclosure. What remains uncertain is everything that happened afterward." He paced slowly. "The media transformed one lion into a mythical guardian. But animals do not recognize justice. They do not understand morality. They react randomly." He pointed toward a large photograph of Caesar. "This lion's behavior was coincidence. Nothing more." Several jurors exchanged uncertain glances. Langley continued confidently, "If this court begins assigning human judgment to wild animals, then we stop relying on evidence. We begin relying on fantasy." Douglas finally looked hopeful. For the first time since his arrest, his defense appeared to have found solid ground. The prosecution's next witness quietly destroyed it. Dr. Allison Grant walked to the stand carrying years of scientific publications beneath her arm. She had spent 21 years studying lion behavior across Africa and North America. After taking the oath, she addressed the jury calmly. "I have reviewed every second of the available footage." Langley smiled politely. "Doctor, can lions determine whether someone is innocent?" "No." "So my client is correct?" "No." The smile disappeared. Dr. Grant continued, "Lions cannot understand legal innocence, but they absolutely distinguish between threatening and non-threatening human behavior." The courtroom became silent. She displayed synchronized videos from 4 different cameras. One showed Amara lying motionless. Another showed the officers shouting aggressively. A third captured veterinary staff approaching calmly. Dr. Grant pressed play. The videos unfolded together. When veterinary personnel approached, Caesar relaxed. When Sheriff Pike moved closer, Caesar immediately displayed territorial blocking. When Deputy Holt attempted entry, Caesar accelerated directly toward him. She paused. Those responses remained perfectly consistent throughout the incident. She looked directly at the jury. This was not random. It was selective behavioral discrimination based on perceived threat. Langley quickly stood. "Objection. Speculation." The judge shook his head. "The witness is qualified." "Overruled." Dr. Grant continued, "No scientific evidence suggests Caesar understood the law, but overwhelming behavioral evidence demonstrates he consistently identified the individuals displaying aggression." She stepped away from the monitor. "In my professional opinion, the lion treated Ms. Johnson as someone requiring protection and treated specific individuals as potential danger." No juror looked toward the defense after that. Then came the videos, one after another. Tourist footage, security cameras, cell phone recordings, traffic cameras outside the service entrance, even a maintenance drone that happened to be surveying nearby fencing. Different angles, different distances, different witnesses, yet every recording revealed the same moment. Mason Holt's hands striking Amara's shoulders, her body lifting over the railing. There was no missing frame, no hidden movement, no voluntary jump. The defense played the recordings repeatedly. Each replay only strengthened the prosecution's case. Late that afternoon, another unexpected witness entered. 80-year-old Margaret Ellis slowly approached the stand using a wooden cane. Few people recognized her, but nearly everyone remembered seeing her video online. She had been visiting the safari park with her grandchildren. Her phone had captured the seconds immediately before Amara fell. Margaret adjusted her glasses. "I've lived through enough years to recognize fear," The prosecutor asked quietly, "What did you see?" She looked toward Douglas Pike. "I saw that young woman trying to protect her phone. I saw the deputy shove her, and I saw the sheriff look around before it happened." The courtroom remained perfectly still. Margaret's voice trembled. "What haunted me wasn't the fall. It was watching two officers invent a lie before that poor woman even hit the ground." No cross-examination followed. The defense simply sat down. The following morning, Amara finally took the witness stand. She folded her hands tightly together before answering the first question. "Were you afraid?" She smiled, sadly. "I've never been more afraid in my life." Her voice remained steady. "When I landed, I thought I had maybe 30 seconds left to live." She paused. "I wasn't thinking about lawsuits. I wasn't thinking about my career. I was thinking about my parents, my friends, the people I would never get to say goodbye to." Several jurors quietly lowered their eyes. The prosecutor asked softly, "What happened when Caesar approached?" Amara looked toward the courtroom window where sunlight spilled across the wooden floor. "I expected him to kill me. Instead, he looked past me." She turned toward the jury. "The most unbelievable part wasn't how powerful he was. It wasn't his roar. It wasn't how close he came." She swallowed. "It was that he seemed to know that I wasn't the danger." Her voice nearly broke. "He kept watching the people who had thrown me there. I still can't explain it. I don't think anyone fully can. But that lion saw something many human beings refused to see. The difference between fear and cruelty." Silence followed. Not courtroom silence, human silence. The kind that arrives when no one can think of anything worthy enough to say next. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, no one needed to ask what the verdict would be. Every juror's face revealed the answer. Guilty. On every count. Douglas Pike closed his eyes. Mason Holt quietly began crying. The judge ordered both men to stand. Before sentencing could even begin, 2 U.S. Marshals stepped forward. Metal handcuffs clicked around Douglas Pike's wrists. For years he had ordered others into restraints. Now he lowered his own hands without resistance. As he was escorted through the courtroom doors, thousands of people waiting outside erupted into applause. The sound rolled through downtown Albuquerque like distant thunder. Inside the courtroom, Amara didn't celebrate. She simply closed her eyes for one brief moment. Not because justice had erased what happened, but because, at last, the truth no longer needed someone to protect it. The desert sky glowed with the warm colors of late autumn as the sun settled behind the red cliffs of New Mexico, bathing Red Canyon Safari Park in the same golden light that had witnessed the day everything changed. 6 months had passed. Time had softened bruises. It had not erased memories. For Amara Johnson, every morning still began with a quiet moment of gratitude. Not because her life had returned to normal, it never would. Because sometimes survival wasn't about returning to who you had been. It was about discovering who you were meant to become. The federal courtroom was nearly full again on the day of sentencing. Unlike the trial, there were no television debates or dramatic arguments, only consequences. Sheriff Douglas Pike stood before the judge wearing an orange prison uniform instead of the polished badge that had once intimidated an entire county. Beside him stood Mason Holt. The deputy, who had once believed one violent shove could silence the truth, now struggled to meet anyone's eyes. Judge Eleanor Brooks looked over the thick stack of sentencing reports before speaking. "For years, you used public authority as a weapon. You violated the trust placed in you. You attempted to silence witnesses. You abused innocent citizens." She paused. "And when confronted with evidence of your crimes, you chose violence over accountability." The courtroom remained silent. The judge lowered her glasses. "Sheriff Douglas Pike, this court sentences you to 28 years in federal prison." Douglas closed his eyes. No anger, no protest, only defeat. She turned toward Mason. "Deputy Mason Holt, you knowingly participated in those crimes. You showed no regard for human life. You are hereby sentenced to 16 years in federal prison." The gavel struck once. Neither man spoke as U.S. Marshals escorted them from the courtroom. For the first time in many years, countless families across New Mexico felt that the law had finally protected them instead of frightening them. Justice did not end with convictions. It transformed Red Canyon Safari Park itself. Marcus Bennett refused to allow the place to become famous only because of tragedy. Instead, he insisted it become known for responsibility. Every safety procedure inside the reserve was rewritten. New reinforced barriers replaced aging railings. Emergency response systems doubled. Body cameras became mandatory for every security employee. Additional visitor observation platforms were constructed to eliminate blind spots. Every surveillance camera now stored recordings simultaneously in 3 separate locations. Nothing could quietly disappear again. At the entrance to the park, a simple bronze plaque appeared beneath a cottonwood tree. It did not mention lawsuits. It did not mention politics. It simply read, "Truth survives when courage refuses to surrender." Thousands of visitors stopped to read it every week. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened across America. Caesar became more than a lion. He became a symbol. Documentaries explored his extraordinary behavior. Universities studied the incident in ethics and animal behavior classes. Artists painted murals showing the great lion standing between fear and innocence. Children wrote school essays about courage inspired by a creature they had never met. Stuffed lions appeared in museum gift shops. Wildlife conservation donations increased dramatically. People no longer spoke only about the lion who protected one woman. They spoke about what his actions had reminded humanity, that strength meant little without compassion, that power carried responsibility, that protection was nobler than domination. Marcus often smiled whenever reporters asked whether Caesar understood what he had become. "I don't think Caesar knows he's famous," Marcus would reply. "I think he simply knows who he is." Amara chose a different path. Television networks offered book contracts. Streaming companies proposed documentaries. Publishers promised millions. She accepted none of them. Instead, she established the Truth Beyond Fear Foundation. Its mission was simple: provide legal assistance for victims of police misconduct and witness intimidation who could not afford representation. Former prosecutors volunteered. Young attorneys joined. Retired investigators offered their experience. Within 6 months, the foundation had already helped dozens of families reopen forgotten cases. Whenever reporters asked why she kept working so hard after everything she had endured, Amara always gave the same answer: "Someone once protected me when I couldn't protect myself. The least I can do is become that protection for someone else." On a quiet November afternoon, Marcus Bennett invited her back to Red Canyon Safari Park. No reporters, no politicians, no television cameras, just a private visit. The park looked peaceful again. Families laughed. Children pointed excitedly toward zebras grazing beneath blue skies. Life had returned. Yet Amara's heartbeat quickened as Marcus led her toward Lion Habitat 3. She had imagined this moment countless times. Still, Nothing prepared her for seeing the enclosure again. The sandstone cliffs, the familiar acacia tree, the patch of earth where she had landed. Marcus gently unlocked the visitor gate. "You don't have to go closer." She smiled softly. "I know, but I want to." She walked slowly toward the viewing fence. For several moments, nothing happened. Caesar rested beneath a rocky ledge nearly 80 yards away. His mane had grown slightly grayer around the edges. Age had begun touching the king. He appeared asleep. Then, one ear lifted. His massive head slowly rose. Across the enclosure, his amber eyes settled on Amara. Marcus quietly held his breath. Several keepers stopped what they were doing. Without urgency, without aggression, Caesar stood. He began walking. Each deliberate step carried the same quiet dignity she remembered from the worst day of her life. Nala followed behind him for several yards before lying down beneath a tree, almost as though she understood this meeting belonged only to them. Visitors noticed. Whispers spread across the overlook. "He's coming." Caesar stopped only a few feet from the protective fence. No roar, no display of dominance, only calm. For nearly a minute, neither moved. Amara looked into the same amber eyes that had once stood between her and death. They seemed softer now, older, peaceful. Slowly, she raised one hand and rested it gently against the steel fence. Not reaching toward him, simply offering gratitude. Her voice was barely louder than the breeze. "Thank you. I never got the chance to say it. You changed my life." Caesar blinked once, slowly, almost thoughtfully. Then he lowered his great head for a brief moment before looking toward the horizon. Marcus quietly wiped moisture from his eyes. "I've known him 12 years. I've never seen him greet anyone like that." Amara smiled. "Maybe he isn't greeting me. Maybe he's saying goodbye." As winter approached, the story continued, reaching people far beyond New Mexico. Teachers used it to discuss integrity. Churches spoke about mercy overcoming hatred. Police academies studied the case to remind recruits that authority without character destroys public trust. Wildlife organizations used Caesar's story to educate millions about rescued animals and the lasting scars left by cruelty. Letters poured into the Truth Beyond Fear Foundation from every corner of America. Some came from people who had survived injustice. Others came from officers determined to restore honor to their profession. Many simply said one thing: "Because of your story, I finally spoke up." Amara kept every letter. They reminded her that courage was contagious. Truth, once spoken aloud, rarely remained alone. As the sun slowly disappeared behind the towering red cliffs, long shadows stretched across the lion habitat. Caesar stood quietly for another moment. Then, without looking back again, the old king turned. He walked toward the rest of his pride waiting beneath the golden light. His powerful silhouette gradually blended into the landscape he ruled. Not as a symbol of fear, but as a guardian who had unknowingly changed countless lives. Amara watched until he disappeared beyond the rocks. Only then did she finally understand something her father had once tried to teach her. Justice is not always delivered by the strongest voice. Sometimes it arrives through unexpected courage, refusing to stand aside when innocence has nowhere left to run. And somewhere beyond the canyon walls, carried gently by the evening wind, the memory of one lion's roar continued to echo, not as a sound of violence, but as an everlasting reminder that truth may be delayed, but it will always find someone brave enough to defend it. Before we say goodbye, I want to leave you with one thought that has stayed with me long after this story ended. Sometimes, God doesn't perform miracles the way we expect. Sometimes He doesn't send an angel with shining wings. Sometimes He uses an unexpected voice, an unexpected stranger, or even one of His magnificent creatures to remind us that truth is never truly alone. I believe that every act of courage, every choice to protect the innocent, and every decision to stand for what is right is a small miracle that God places into this world through ordinary hearts. If you're going through a difficult season right now, whether you're carrying pain, loneliness, financial struggles, or silent battles that no one else can see, please don't give up. Keep taking one step forward. God often works quietly, and His timing is always greater than our understanding. I want to share something personal with you. I'm raising 2 wonderful children on my own. Life isn't always easy. There are days when the bills pile up, the work feels endless, and exhaustion whispers that I should quit. But every morning I choose hope instead of despair. I choose gratitude instead of bitterness. I choose to believe that God is already preparing tomorrow's blessings, even when I can't see them today. If this single parent can keep smiling and moving forward, I truly believe you can too. So wherever you are in the world, never stop believing that brighter days are ahead. Be kind. Forgive when you can. Help someone who needs a hand. Speak the truth even when it's difficult. You never know whose life your courage might change. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to share it with someone who may need hope today. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, and let me know what part of this story moved you the most. If you enjoy stories that inspire faith, courage, and compassion, please subscribe to the channel and join our growing family. Your support truly helps me continue creating these stories. May God bless you and your family with good health, peace, strength, and protection. May He guide your steps, fill your heart with hope, and surround your home with His love. And may you never forget that even in your darkest moments, you are never walking alone. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until our next story, take care of yourself, keep believing, and may God watch over you always.